The United States government remains unfazed despite facing lawsuits now from top universities over its decision to bar visas for foreign students taking only online courses. The US press secretary has said that a better lawsuit would be from students who have to pay full tuition fees without in-person classes. He was, of course, reacting to the lawsuits filed by top varsities like Harvard and MIT. Harvard University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology yesterday moved court suing the Trump government over the new student visa curbs. Both the institutions challenged the guidelines of the US Immigration and Customs Department, which said that foreign students taking only online courses cannot be in the United States. India, which has thousands of students in the US, has already taken up the matter with the Trump government. Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla spoke to the United States Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs, David Hale. The United States conveyed to India that they could decide and could look into actually tweaking their current order. Let's take this across to some guests who are joining us on this broadcast. We've got Greg Siskind, immigration lawyer. He's joining us live from Memphis. We've also got a number of Indian students who are going to be telling us about their situation currently. Irfan Nuriwala, who studies at the Georgetown University, he's joining us on this broadcast. We also have Arjun Yadav, who is a student at the Chapman University. Greg, I want to come to you first. I just saw your tweets that you put out on social media where you've pretty much dissected the lawsuit that's been filed by MIT and Harvard. In your opinion, do you think it's got enough meat to actually create some sort of a challenge to the Trump government's order?
I do. I think that they laid out a very strong case that the way that the administration rolled this out is a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act, a couple of different sections. They went really in great detail in this lawsuit. It's amazing that they did this in 48 hours and showed point by point how the administration failed to comply with the rules for how they can roll this out. So I would be more surprised now if a judge didn't stop this rather than if this actually goes forward.
I also want to focus on the order that came from ICE. I want to understand from you, was this something that was in the offing? Because, when an order came from the Trump government with regards to H-1B visas, we kind of saw it coming. This seemed to be out of the blue, completely unexpected.
That's right. We had advance warning about what might be happening with respect to the travel bans that have been rolled out over the last couple of months. This was something that wasn't expected, especially because the Trump administration just 3 months ago indicated that they were going to have the policy of allowing online learning in effect for the duration of the emergency. That's their words, not Harvard's. So most of the higher education community felt like they were going to stand by what they had said, and when the emergency was over, they would revert back to the old rules. So this was a complete reversal by the administration, really with no warning.
Have you seen anything like this before? I'm sure you've dealt with many, many cases and many orders from the ICE. Have you seen any sort of directive like this before?
No, this is the first time we've seen anything remotely like this involving foreign students in the U.S. And it's usually a fairly quiet area of immigration law, student immigration, but this was pretty dramatic, and really, I've been doing this 30 years. I haven't seen anything like this.
That's where, Arjun, I want to understand from you, what's the general mood right now among foreign students? We were having a conversation earlier, and Arjun, you were telling me that there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of anxiety, understandably so, among foreign students there.
Yeah, I mean, if we can go back to when the crisis really hit everyone, students were told that the colleges and universities were shutting down, and they weren't given any notice. Do keep in mind that most of these students lived in dorms, so they were asked to vacate. Most of the students live off of the on-campus jobs, and because the universities are shutting down, they can no longer resort to that source of income to manage their rent or living expenses. So there's this huge cloud of anxiety and paranoia, not only around their future or career, but also around their physical well-being, because back in March, nobody knew how lethal or the extent to which this virus can pose health risks. the few who actually managed to brave through this situation and stay back, they in some way were rewarded by the administration by saying that the online classes can be allowed, and students who are taking online classes can still remain within their student status, which wasn't previously, where in the previous scenarios, you were only allowed to take one online class. So that was a welcome move. But with this new policy in place, what effectively the administration is saying is that if you are not taking at least one class in person, then you are in violation of your student status. And irrespective of whether or not you're in the country, you will have to leave.
And there have been a lot of questions about whether universities will take a stand. And on that, I want to bring in Mihir Mankad as well. He is the professor of practice at the Tufts University, also a former lecturer at the Harvard University. Mihir, thank you for joining us here on India Today. What I want to understand from you is whether you believe that more universities could take a stand. You've had Harvard, you've had MIT, you've also had Cornell University taking a stand against the ISIS order. Do you see more varsities stepping in?
Yeah, so thank you, Akshita. This is a really complicated issue on a number of levels. I'm right here in Cambridge, right between Harvard and MIT, and these have been two of the first universities to basically take a stand and say that they're going to sue, ICE basically on this administration. And Larry Bacow, who is the president of Harvard, came out with a statement saying that this seems to be putting pressure on universities to host classes live and endangering lives of students, of faculty, of others. So I think I tend to agree with that. Today, as you may know, US President Donald Trump has tweeted in capital letters that universities, schools need to start in the fall. And there were 3 exclamation points after that. And I think that is a bit of a risky move for universities that are already reeling. So right now, schools like the Fletcher School of International Law and Diplomacy, where I taught for 6 years, schools like the Harvard Graduate School of Education, these service schools are also struggling to keep international students, right? With all this going on in the country, the rising costs of tuition. And this certainly puts pressure on universities to rethink what is the safest route. And finally, I just want to add that, I was a student at an undergraduate university at Stanford many years ago and then did 2 master's degrees here. There is tremendous power in being on campus. You're in classes. Students come to classes for 3 hours a day or so, but they are, their education is really 12 to 15 hours a day of being on the residence, of learning the culture, really seeing the impact of news and current events on the country. And I think this is dangerous, putting pressure and taking that experience away from the students.
That is such a good point that you have made, Mihir, about how a huge part of the learning experience for so many of these students is being on campus, is interacting with students from different parts of the world, is being there physically for those classes. And that's why, do you think that, these universities will actually buckle under this kind of pressure from the government and go for physical classes or actually go fully online?
Yeah, it's hard for me to speak for the university system in general, which is so diverse. But I'll tell you, the universities that I've been surrounded by and been affiliated with have taken a strong stance. Today, I was reading the letter written by the Tufts University president, Anthony Monaco, who I also know well, who said that, look, he sees the stress that students are in right now. And he sees that this move by the departments that have brought this together, the administration, put undue pressure and exacerbate the situation in a pandemic where students and staff are already stressed. So I see universities around me, Harvard University, Tufts University, MIT, also my alma mater, Stanford University, strong stance against it. But these universities tend to lean left. The question is, what about the universities that maybe go with these political ideologies? And I think in this time, the right thing needs to be done. And I think the right thing is giving choice to students that have made such sacrifices financially, emotionally, physically, to invest in this education, to partake in what the university offers them and choose the path that is right for them.
Greg, this is a point that's been raised often about who's the target with this kind of an order. And it's not really the foreigner students, it's the universities, because this is pressure that the Trump government intends to pile on these universities to open up and thereby give an impetus of sorts to his reopening plan after the coronavirus. So there are a lot of questions about whether universities also will do that. The Trump government, in response to this lawsuit that's been filed by, Harvard and MIT, has stated that it should be the students who file a lawsuit about the tuition fees. So it looks like that's where the Trump government is going with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is clearly political as far as the campaign and trying to make it seem like the country is getting back to normal. In fact, in the lawsuit itself, Harvard noted that the July 6th directive, ICE used said that the March 13th earlier guidance had made allowances that were during the height of the coronavirus disease. In other words, they were saying in March they had the need to have flexibility because of COVID, and now they're saying that there's no longer an emergency, even though in the United States right now we have an infection rate that is out of control, certainly higher than it was in mid-March, and it's continuing to climb. I think this is part of the administration's goal of trying to minimize what's actually happening in the country right now, because it's not helping the president in his campaign.
And several of these universities, Ivy Leagues particularly, they're very clear about their political leaning, which is why there are questions about whether other universities would hesitate to do that.
Is that a question for me?
Yes, Greg.
Yeah, so, granted, the Harvard and MIT are certainly located in a location that's not exactly friendly Trump territory, but there are about 1 million foreign students that are in the United States, and they are at every major state university, and a lot of them are in red states, as well as the states that are less friendly to the president. I don't think that this is something that even in states where schools, the major state schools are located, that are in Trump territory are particularly happy about this. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback. I've already seen that anecdotally, and I don't think the president is going to get the results that he thinks he's going to get out of this.
Okay. Irfan Nuriwala is also joining us on this broadcast. He's a student of Georgetown University. Irfan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Georgetown University has issued a statement yet. So what really are foreigner students in the university campus really doing for some clarity with regards to this order?
Yeah, Akshata, just to correct, my name is Irfan Nuruddin, and I'm a professor at Georgetown,
Apologies.
not a student. No, that's fine. So the president of the university issued a statement this evening here in the US, and like its counterparts across the country, Georgetown has condemned ICE and the president's action in essentially trying to bully universities into providing in-person instruction, even when the universities have deemed that not to be the safest way possible. Georgetown is going to be using what they're calling a hybrid model. So there'll be classes offered on campus as well as online classes. International students will be invited back to campus so that they can take in-person classes, thereby meeting the ICE directive. But let's be clear, I mean, this is a bullying tactic by the Trump administration to pressure universities to open. And this has nothing to do with partisan leaning. I mean, the fact of the matter is that every university I'm familiar with, I got my undergraduate degree, my PhD here in the US. I've taught at 2 major universities, including Georgetown, over the last 20 years. Every university has taken the responsibility of how to teach its students in the pandemic extremely seriously. What the Trump administration doesn't like is that there's a narrative that they're pushing that everything is back to normal. And that's simply not the case. Professors like me have legitimate concerns as to whether it'll be safe to go back onto campus and teach. Indian parents that I talk to all the time are worried about whether their children will be safe coming back to America, where the infection is clearly out of control and without any leadership to control it. And they're trying to put as much pressure. So universities will do what they have to do to protect their international students. But this is a terrible situation that the Trump administration has created.
What would your response be, Irfan, to the Trump administration's statement there with regards to the lawsuit, where they've said that it should be the students who file the lawsuit against universities because they're having to pay full tuition fees?
Well, I mean, that's not a trivial point. I mean, then, universities really are grappling with the question of sort of what exactly are the responsibilities for students who pay an incredible amount of money to come and get an education. And as Mr. Mihir said, Professor Mihir said, a large part of that is the on-campus experience. So there's no doubt about that. But this is not a normal period. This is an unprecedented situation. Universities are scrambling and trying to figure out how best to do that. There were some lawsuits filed by parents of students who felt like their children should have a different kind of education in the midst of a pandemic. They're welcome to do so, but it's not for the Trump administration to make that decision. It's for the students to decide what they're willing to pay for and not. If any student who I'm advising says, I don't think this is worth it, I tell them, consider taking the semester off, defer coming to college in the fall. Don't come if you're not ready for that. But that's the student's decision. For the President of the United States to be pretending as if he's somehow advocating on behalf of the students when the students themselves are expressing that they are not comfortable coming back to campus in all cases, is simply, he's a bully. He's using this to bully the universities. The universities will figure out ways to help their students and Mr. Trump is not going to get what he wants.
Mihir, can I bring you in on that as well? The general consensus among many students that we've spoken to really in the United States is that they're saying, look, we either have to expose ourselves to the virus or face deportation, and that's barely fair to the students who are currently there.
No, this has become a more challenging country for Indian students especially, but students from many countries around the world to come to in the first place. I think people are a little hesitant about coming to Trump's America in light of a number of developments. The costs are going up, and the proposition for universities is really being looked at under a microscope. So previously, when I went to college, you went to universities to get access to libraries, to get access to books, to speak to people live. Right now, most of the skills courses and the content is available. So what students are coming for is really that live experience, being physically in the residential halls, in housing, interacting live with faculty, being in classes such as the one that I teach around verbal communication and public speaking, and going through that experience as a group together. Now you're taking that away, and then there's this pressure of not even having the choice to be here. I think it puts students in a very difficult situation. And I also want to tell you just practically, so in the past I've taught remote online courses. I have friends who are teaching these courses. And just imagine this, it's 9 a.m. there. It's 11:30 p.m. here in Boston.
Yes.
Right. With that time difference, you're telling students to reach out, submit assignments, do tests, be ready for classes. Any later here, right, would get really dubious. In the same way around with the 10.5-hour, 9.5-hour time difference. It is a different experience for students to study in the US.
It's simply impractical, as simple as that. And in this fight between the Trump government, the administration and the universities, it's the students that seem to be caught in the crosshairs. And Arjun, I want to understand, you've been saying that you've been speaking to a lot of students as well. You interact with a lot of foreigner students. The general mental pressure that you're under, because, as Mihir also pointed out, this is a very, very different America than what perhaps it was a few years ago. Very welcoming to foreigner students. Trump has always said it still is, but when you see things like this coming out, this kind of an order, you tend to think otherwise.
Sorry, was that for me?
Yes, Arjun.
Yeah, sorry. Is under threat, and we have we just had to come after only about 2 weeks for an executive order that these same students might be looking, at work visas later on, and are now being told that there's a travel ban for those categories. It is as an immigration lawyer, I basically help people achieve their U.S. immigration dreams, whether it's temporary to come as a student or long term, and it is a much more difficult task these days to help people in that regard. I don't know if we're going to see a change in 120 days or not, and I don't know how much permanent damage has been done by this administration. Whether another president in a couple of months is going to be able to reverse that.
Greg, if you had to advise some of the foreigner students out there who are worried, who don't know where to look for any sort of advice or direction at this point, what would be your advice to them at this point?
Well, I mean, the first place they ought to be looking is at the international student offices at their universities. Should be putting in information. I put out a questionnaire form online yesterday to start gathering information from students to basically find out what was happening. And a lot of schools hadn't yet provided any information, so there was a bit of a vacuum, and a lot of students were having to go onto social media to find out what was happening. I think that's improving, and I think the schools themselves were trying to scramble to figure out exactly what was going on. But that's still probably the first place to go to find out what's going on. There's a lot of good resources as well online. Probably the one place I wouldn't go for information on this is ICE itself or Department of Homeland Security, which is not providing helpful information to those that are affected by this.
There's also a worry, Greg, for some students, who during this pandemic decided to head back to their home countries. They still have an F1 visa, and they're wondering now, can they actually come back to America, or are they stuck now in their home countries?
Well, so that's part of the challenge here, is that the schools have to, I said there are about 1 million foreign students in the country. They are all these schools are charged with issuing new I-20s to hundreds of thousands of these students. That have to, then, and the ones that are outside the United States have to first of all, they have to be able to get visa appointments. That's been a huge problem around the world. The U.S. consulates are largely not operating, and I'm getting dozens of questions every day from F1s before this happened on how they were even going to get appointments. So that's going to be a challenge. There's a challenge where you have to not only show that the school has a hybrid model, like was just mentioned a minute ago, but that the student is actually enrolled in classes that are part of that hybrid model. It's not good enough that the school offers those in-person classes if the student is actually not enrolled in them. In a lot of schools, that's going to be impossible to do before these I-20s are issued, and the students have to go for visa appointments because the registrations for classes happen right before the beginning of the semester. So there's no way to prove that you're actually even in the classes that you're required to demonstrate are being done in person. It's a very, very difficult task, I think, for students at this point. And I think this litigation may be the only way to clear this up.
I think we all agree that what is happening right now is unprecedented. So you don't really have, the pages of history to turn back to get some clarity on what's going to happen next. We're going to have to wait and see how this lawsuit also plays out and whether it in turn provides some relief to students. I'd like to thank Greg for joining us and giving us some clarity with regards to the ICE order and what options are there before students. Thanks to Arjun also for sharing his experience with us. Mihir, Irfan, thank you for joining us and telling us really how the universities could deal with this challenge, because it's, as I said earlier, a clash between universities and the Trump administration, and in the crosshairs are these foreigner students, many of them who don't know what really they have to do next.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.